If you had told me 10 years ago that I could be anything I wanted to be, I probably would have chosen to be a cartoon character. To me, everything about the life of a cartoon character seemed easier. I mean, they don't even have to choose a different outfit each day. Their clothes reflected what I found the most appealing about them, the simplicity. As a child, growing up in a household not big enough for my personality, I learned the art of masking. I love telling stories, chatting about the best part of my day and all of the newest drama, which there was obviously a lot of in preschool. But when I was met with a difference, I realized that my bubbly, talkative personality was perceived by others as annoying or irritating, and that meant I had to be less social. From a young age, I began to whittle down my personality into a simplified, easygoing, likable character. You see, cartoon characters are consistent. Oh yeah, he's the funny one who plays soccer. She's the shy one who likes to cook. They have one plot, one theme, and never, ever change. Character development was not really in my vocabulary. I mean, I was idolizing characters that were both literally and figuratively two-dimensional. When it came to activities in school where we had to describe ourselves in just one word, I found myself in the rare moment of being at a loss for them. I obsessively took personality tests, trying to find out where I belonged, but was disappointed each time to discover that I didn't really seem to have a cohesive identity. Little PSA, do not rely on BuzzFeed to induce a spiritual awakening. You'll just end up being mad that you keep getting Hufflepuff on those stupid Which Hogwarts House Are You quizzes. My every waking moment was plagued with the question, who am I? In elementary school, everyone has a label. You're either the shy kid or the class clown, the bookworm or the sporty one, the teacher's pet or the bully. I somehow never managed to fit into one of these cliques. All the other kids seemed so confident in who they were, and to be honest, I was jealous. I was so frustrated that I was human, multifaceted and dynamic and imperfect and capable of so much love and emotion. Even in my pursuit to be 2D, I yearned to stand out. What I wanted more than anything, even more than to be a cartoon character, was to be liked. One thing children are fantastic at is mimicking, and if there was one thing I had learned from my favorite shows, it was that I had to be static. Taking inspiration from my favorite cartoons, I created this simplified caricature of myself, one that I hoped would be easier for people to digest. It worked, for a while at least. I was content enough. This was when my TV show began. Even outside of school, I began to wear my character's personality, and I started to imagine I was living in some Truman Show-esque world. I had this compulsive need to perform, and at times I couldn't even distinguish between the real me and the correct me. I had a bad case of main character syndrome, and I began to imagine that everybody else in the world could see exactly what I was doing at all moments, just like I had viewed my own cartoons. As I aged, cartoons became sitcoms and dramas, and this is where the imitation really ramped up. How many of you guys are familiar with the show Glee? I'm only a little ashamed to admit that this is where my next source of inspiration came from. Those of you who have seen the show will know about the character Santana, and for those of you who are uncultured and fortunate enough to have not seen it, Santana is basically the sassy, mean one. She has confidence a mile high and a snarky remark for everybody, and in my eyes, she was the unbothered queen that everyone admired. I don't know why I admired her so much, because it turns out she was kind of a bully, but in my mind, she was cool, and so that's who I was for a few years. It turns out, when you act mean for the bit, you can't expect everyone to be in on it. I didn't have this laugh track behind me to indicate that my sassiness was a joke. It was like I was the only one with the script, and everybody else was trying to sabotage my queen bee dreams. While I thought I was the funny girl with an attitude that everyone admired, it turns out I was just mean. I thought I was happy, but then COVID happened. When the pandemic rolled in and everybody was stuck in quarantine, I found myself alone with my identity. With no one to mask for, I began to see the real me peek through, and to be honest, I was terrified. This monster I had convinced myself was unfit for society suddenly became relevant again, and confronting it was quite the rude awakening. Around this time, I began to go to therapy, and one day I walked into my therapist's office with an awkward shuffle and announced, "I think I have dissociative identity disorder." This disorder, previously known as multiple personality disorder, is described by the DSM-5 as the presence of two or more separate and distinct personalities within an individual. My therapist was, of course, intrigued by how I had come to this conclusion at the ripe old age of 12. So I explained, well, whenever something happens, it's like my emotions take over and have a mind of their own. I have these feelings that occur whenever something remotely interesting happens, and I can't control them. That day, I was diagnosed as human. Imagine being so disconnected from yourself that your emotions, your very own essence, is so foreign that you mistake it for an illness. Imagine being 12 years old and being so far gone from your identity that you genuinely believe there is something wrong with you. That day, I experienced some kind of spiritual awakening, no thanks to BuzzFeed, that can be described in one word: clarity. This was quickly overshadowed by a feeling of being overwhelmed by the process ahead of me to rediscover who I was. I was at rock bottom, but at least I had some kind of map of how I was going to regain myself. Over the next few weeks, I was extremely vulnerable. I had lost the comfort of my mask, and I was fragile and raw until I could begin to build myself up again. So, the reason I'm here with you tonight is to share with you what I have learned over the past few years. Firstly, imitation is admiration. I began to really think about why I chose the characteristics that I did, and I realized that to a degree, each of those characters were a representation of myself. I was silly, like Mabel from Gravity Falls, and compassionate like Moana, and fierce like Santana, so I guess there were some redeeming qualities about her. The truth is that this character that I had created wasn't actually so different from myself, because the parts and characters that I admired were the same parts of myself that I admired, but was also the most ashamed of. The common denominator was that each of these characters were proud of their qualities, which I had been belittled and excluded for. So if you ever find yourself mimicking a character that you admire, you are not an imposter. Additionally, there is a use for mimicry. Channeling another character's bravery when you're about to do something that you're really nervous about is actually a really great tool, as long as you don't get too attached to the idea of constantly being someone else. This comes with the caveat that characters are never perfect, and obviously no one is. But what I mean by this is that when humans are human, we are perfectly imperfect, and characters don't always represent this. There aren't a lot of shows and movies that really capture the human experience. At least as far as I know. I just watched Dance Moms and Glee, so. Secondly, it is never too late to change. When I realized that I did not know who I was, I thought it was over for me. I was stuck in this state of despair where I was convinced that I was too old, too deep in this deception to rediscover myself. I was 12. The truth is, there is always another opportunity, another chance to improve yourself. I think New Year's resolutions are stupid. Why do we wait for up to 364 whole days just to improve ourselves? Why do we wait until it's a new month, a new week, a new day even, to try and change ourselves for the better? Imagine how much more we could change if we didn't wait for the most convenient opportunity to present itself, and instead we make our own opportunities. My final and all-inclusive piece of wisdom that I'll leave you with tonight is that you never stop changing. There is never an end destination. You can never achieve perfection. And this unfortunately means that you're never going to be fully comfortable with your being. The goal is to be comfortable with the constant change and accept that perfection is unattainable. You have to be okay with the journey. You must accept the fact that life will never just stand still for you. You are going to be constantly transforming and reinventing yourself, and that is okay. So what does all of this mean for my cartoon character? Well, my cartoon character is now constantly developing and changing. I recently rewatched some of the shows I used to love, for research, of course, and no other reason. And while rewatching Glee, I realized that over the 6 seasons of the show, each character is transformed, but only on one plane. We live in a world where we have an infinite number of dimensions to improve upon. Unlike TV, your life will never have just one plot or one character arc. You're going to get better, and you're going to get worse, and you're going to go through your inevitable emo phase, and you're going to love, and you're going to hate, and through it all, you will become more and more yourself. The work I have put into self-discovery has led me to an answer to a question that used to be the source of existential dread. Who am I? I, Kay Handler, am a storyteller. Thank you.